What's going on, creators? Yeah, I just want to get on here and bring everybody back to now. Appreciate y'all being here and vibing with me for a bit. Yeah, today I'd like to talk a little bit about thinking of versus thinking from. I seen a really good graphic that someone drew. It was in a Facebook group of Neville Goddard Law of Assumption kind of group. I just want to share that with you guys because it really helps to visualize what I'm talking about. Let me get that going here. There we go. Let me minimize this guy. And so, yeah, we got this cat, that's thinking of like a fish to eat, something good, and probably is desiring something besides like dry cat food or whatever, versus thinking from, which is under the assumption of fulfilled desire. How would you feel with the fish in your mouth versus just thinking of a fish dinner? And that concept goes on besides just that graphic, and it really includes a whole lot of just like the law of assumption in general, and how we can start to break out of some of our fear cycles that can keep us trapped in our old slave mindset. But like yeah, you can get all sorts of different types of fear cycles that can start to present itself, and you start thinking of like ways to break those cycles, and you start thinking of ways to do that. Instead of embodying the state of mind that you are already blessed right here and right now. That's like the biggest difference. The old mindset, it was cursed, and so everything is based on a premise of being cursed. Like, oh, what if this worst case scenario happens again? Oh, what if it's even worse this time? What if? Versus thinking from, there isn't that doubt and fear associated with it, and it's something that you can start to embody right here and right now. I mean, the only thing that's pushing that away from you is your own mindset, really. I mean, there's no reason why you can't put it on right now other than the story that you're telling yourself of why that's bullshit. It's like, oh, no fucking way, Mike. I need to be miserable and, be hopeless and, spend the entire day in a state of being a victim and, whatever. Versus, putting on, like, something amazing is happening right now. And like really embodying that throughout the day is really important, and it's important to start shifting out of that thinking of mindset, because that type of daydreaming and desiring ultimately unconsciously pushes what you do want away from you. It's part of like the nature of consciousness, where it's like that resistance, that drama, that kind of energy of not having, that scarcity mindset creates more and more scarcity as you start reacting and dealing with reality from a place of scarcity. For example, it's like that's one of the big kind of cultural things at the moment that I experienced with inflation and the economy, and it's all collapsing and everything's just some fucking shit show. Again, it's going from one drama, one hysteria to the next drama, hysteria through a screen, which, ultimately has the goal of like, oh, we need these external saviors and these positions of power to solve these problems, even though they're the ones creating the problems with their own policies. But that's not to say that that's not part of like design, like a creation. Because ultimately, the fact that like money in itself is created from nothing is actually, you can look at it like I did for years of being some just like scam, some Ponzi scheme scam, where it's like, oh, you put the money in the bank and then right out the back door it goes, loaning out, at 10%, keeping it in there, and everything else is created out of nothing, and backed by debt and all this bullshit, and it's like that was my mental story for years, probably a decade or more. But I've come to realize, if money's created out of nothing by the they, then actually that's pretty good news, because you can then create money out of nothing just as easily, and so keeping that mindset of it being a current, an energy flow, redefining, revising how you're dealing with this, because even when I was in jail, there was like a time where ramen noodles was a type of currency. It's like, so if you're going to replace one with another, like Bitcoin, that's the other thing. Like, oh, we need Bitcoin to save us from this collapse. It's like, oh, so even more money created from nothing, but this type of money created out of nothing is like trackable and traceable and all this kind of drama. It's like, I don't want that shit. I don't want people knowing what the fuck I'm spending my money on and tracking how I'm doing. Conversely though, it could be kind of nice because as like a business owner, I got to keep track of all this bullshit just to prove taxes and everything. It's like part of like having a business and like being kind of introduced to this new flow, this new way of thinking about thinking from versus thinking of. Like the old mindset is constantly in the state of scarcity. It's thinking of ways to combat the scarcity through efforting and force and drama and just moving shit around and through personal willpower and all this kind of shit that doesn't really work. There's a temporary time where it does, and you can pound it through and you can just force something to work. But my experience of that is then it gets fucking drama. It turns into like almost like a djinn. If you're familiar with like these genie movies, where it's like, what was that movie? I think it's called The Djinn, where it's like, oh, you get these wishes, but then the wishes, like, yeah, you get the wish, but it comes to you in a very fucked up way. So it's like, oh, I just want more money, and so it's like, oh, here you go, here's a big pile of money from the genie. Meanwhile, it's stolen from a mob boss that now wants to kill you, and just like all this fucking drama, and it's like, okay, well, that's not ideal. And so moving more into like a state of like abundance, you start realizing what you're spending, there's only one of like, there's like the oneness. So it's like what you give to another, we're all connected. So it's like you're giving to another actually gives it back to you, in this weird flow. It's like as you're spending the money, and that's like actually how I'm kind of like looking at banking anymore. It's just like most people that are in scarcity think that when they put all this money in the bank, it's just like hoarded and safe in there, not realizing that as soon as you put the money in it, you are basically like an investor to the bank. And it's like, well, here's $1,000. Well, then they turn it into $10,000 and some fucking make believe little loan that they charge interest with on your fucking thousand. Meanwhile, you think it's just sitting in there, not realizing that, nope, as soon as you put it in there, it's right into the flow, the current, which is not actually really that bad of a thing, because like then it's still part of this flow, this kind of moving, this money velocity type thing, and knowing that, you can start to do that too, and then as you become more and more of thinking from a state of being abundant, you're not thinking in terms of being reactive to these different things. You're still in kind of a creation mode, which is only now. It's like, I was listening to Valuetainment. I like listening to Patrick Bet Davis, I think is how you say his name. And his point of view, he's has a successful business and stuff, and so curious on his mindset and how he's interpreting these different things that are coming through the pipeline, and he was talking about the other reason businesses fail and stuff, and I kind of gleaned from that a different kind of outlook, but I think a big part of it is that, again, that scarcity mindset creeping in a form of loss, fear of loss, because if you haven't experienced both sides of the pendulum of scarcity, your scarcity and not enoughness, it's like, oh, I just broke all the time, I don't have enough to pay for this, I don't have enough to do this, and it's like constantly just being reactive to the world based on not enoughness. And then when you do have enough, when that switch flips, and it's like all of a sudden now you're making shitloads of cash, and things are going in the opposite direction, well, then there's the fear of loss, of like, oh shit, I don't want to fuck this up, oh, how can I do this, and then you start getting in your mind and you start losing that thinking from abundance, and you start drifting back into like operating from a space of reactivity and scarcity, which is not real. That's it's all your consciousness externalized. And so it's like your business, everything that you're doing in your life is a demonstration of that inner man, basically, our inner being, not to sound sexist or whatever, but that inner being, that inner state of consciousness and you know, and that boils down to like your worthiness. You feel like worthy of it. You feel guilt and shame, you know, that you're gonna push it away. You know, if you know, it's all these different things, but you need to check in the moment, you know, right here, right now. Are you thinking of what you want, or are you thinking from it? You know, it's like how, you know, go back to that picture, you know, of the cat and everything. You know, it's like, are you thinking of it, you know, or are you thinking from it? Let me pull it up, because I think it's like a helpful visual, and I think you can see who drew it in the you know, Glenn Usher, I think, drew it. But you know, it's like, are you thinking of it, or are you thinking from already achieving it? You know, and the thing with like abundance, in my opinion, you know, and this is just my opinion, but like I feel like it's just not having fear of money, or whatever, either way. You know, it's just like I don't even fucking think about it. You know, it's like, and I feel like that's like part of it. You know, it's like because when I was like super broke and like constantly in a state of scarcity, and like going to food pantries and fucking food banks and shit, and just food stand, you know, the whole fucking thing. You know, it's like I was in that kind of world for years. You know, and I didn't like it. It was stressful and it was aggravating, and like it was intense, and it was like it's not, you know, ideal. You know, that's my opinion. You can be in that state all you want though, but you know, having experienced that, it's easier now to catch when those old thoughts and those old beliefs and those old assumptions start to manifest in the mind, of, you know, drifting back into the old mindset of being cursed, being a slave, being part of the matrix world. I mean, there's so many ways you can say it, you know, but it's just that programming. You know, it's just that mindset of just like, oh well, competition's real. There's a limited supply. You know, we got to fight for survival. It's us versus them. You know, all of these kinds of bullshit ways of thinking. You know, which is not abundant. You know, and if you look into the world, you know, as like the example of like abundance, you know, a lot of the people that are like highlighted as being uber rich and shit, they're still in a state of scarcity. I mean, if you look around, it's like a lot of the people in the world that are in your face, um, you know, are in such scarcity, they think the world is overpopulated, and like they're drifting into these pagan beliefs of like, oh, we need to sacrifice to please the earth spirits, and you know, keep our crops from fucking whatever, and having floods and horrible climate issues, and we need sacrifice, we need your sacrifice. And it's like, listen, pagan, you know, you can take your science, you know, which has been obviously over and over again demonstrated just being inaccurate, wrong, projecting way out into linear time, into this quote unquote future that's not real. It's never about the here and now, which is the only time you can actually even do something about anything. It's like, you know, oh, you know, you have these people that are just borderline throw your baby in a volcano to appease the earth gods, to give us a good climate for this year. You know, basically looking at that is like, oh, okay, that's what's going. It's the same shit over and over again on repeat. There is no correct answer, because it's all, you know, what's going on now. It's like, what I fell for those same scams. I used to think, oh, the rainforest is going away, you know, acid rain, fucking hole in the ozone layer, all this shit. Yeah. Oh, don't fall into a fucking quicksand. You know, it's like I was into all that kind of brainwashing shit from the world too, until I realized that it was like 100% a fucking scam. And again, another example of scarcity mindset. And then the you take that out to even further. Then you have like this idea like, well, we just need to reduce the population to keep the earth at a sustainable level for see, it's like such scarcity. And you see that with people that, you know, are supposed to be, you know, quote unquote abundant, but you know, that's the opposite side of the pendulum. So it's like you have the same, you know, digging out of dumpsters to try to get, you know, some food or whatever, to, oh, I'm going to really think this is a wise decision to like depopulate mass groups of people for whatever reason. I mean, it's it's retarded. But like, it's another example of thinking of this magical utopia future. Meanwhile, oh, the ends justify the means, even though that's always what you're saying in the present moment, which means like it's like you're spending your life just being a piece of shit over and over and over again for some magical future that never gets here, And so, that's an example of the world, which a lot of times shows the contrast and shows you what not to do. But like, getting more into like a thinking from that's something you can actually do right now. It's like, how would you feel, if the climate was perfect, that you don't have to worry about how fucking nature balances. That's the other thing. It's like looking at everything that you're doing as being somehow like against the natural order of things is retarded. And that's another example of like the arrogance of like the ego kind of mind of like, oh, I'm separate from the creation and therefore everything I'm doing is dirty and awful. It's like, have you been out in nature? I mean, it's like, my wife, she was like saying something to me about like wasting food or whatever. It's like, wasting food? You talk, because I used to feel like that too with this like programming I used to get when I was a child of like, well, can't you see the people starving in Africa just dying to have a slice of bread? And you got the nerve to throw food away, and it's like, okay, nothing gets wasted, So it's like, oh, so I'm gonna throw this shit away. You tell me a bug's not gonna eat it, that then's gonna contribute to a bird eating the bug. They get into, it's all part of this fucking creation, and so it's like getting this idea of like I'm bad and whatever because I threw something away. It's like, have you ever seen an apple tree? It'll dump half the fucking apples on the ground. It's like this idea of waste and shit. Not to say that, oh, well, Mike, well, what about this extreme example? Or what about this? And what about that? And it's like, there's an example of every fucking scenario. It's like, if people want to be difficult, and it's like, this is in general, this is generalities, and it's like, but getting back to thinking of versus thinking from, having the mindset of like the ultimate thinking from is I think what Jesus was talking about, with the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God being within, and to seek that first above everything else. And that's the thing I hear a lot of times with like the law of assumption crowd, the law of attraction crowd, and it's something I've done. Not to say, not to judge people and like, oh, they're doing something wrong and evil, but looking at that, I just find it to be a stumbling block because it's like when you start chasing these carrots of like, okay, once you realize that your thoughts and your assumptions and your beliefs have a big impact on how things manifest and how you demonstrate these different things through your life, which that's why I believe stewarding is a big part of this, where it's like instead of constantly craving and wanting and desiring and all this bullshit that's for this quote unquote future, thinking from is like, oh, how would you feel if you've already attained these things? Because most of the shit you want is to bring some sort of peace or to bring some sort of a mental state of consciousness, which you can embody now. And as you do that, then it will externalize through the demonstration of that faith, that it will just come to you. You don't got to worry about the how. Worrying about the how is one of the biggest stumbling blocks, and is one of the biggest drawbacks that a lot of people in the law of assumption and law of attraction start getting into, that I've experienced personally, where it's like, oh, well, I just want this material object, I just want this situation, I want to be a better slave. I want the bigger room in the fucking slave house. It's like, instead of like, oh, I can not be a slave at all. But when you're stuck in this old matrix mind, it's like you just try to be the best slave and have all the fucking bells and whistles of being the top slave, instead of that you can start putting on what I believe Jesus was talking about, where it's like, how would you feel if you're thinking from heaven being now here in this breath now, it's like, would you have these reactive thoughts? Would you have these attack thoughts? Would you have these scarcity concerns? Would you have these body worries of like, oh, what is this sensation? Am I dying? Is that my heart that's fucking doing something weird? Or is that my digestive system? Or whatever. It's like, oh, I'm having all these mobility issues. Am I getting more and more feeble? Am I getting more and more weak? Let all that shit go. It's like, those are all just mental stories and mental narratives that, if you're not worrying about the hows, and just trying to focus on here and now, this moment. What does it feel like to be blessed? Think from that. Would you be having these desire thoughts, these reactive thoughts? A lot of times people will get into oh, I want this and that to satisfy their scarcity fear, which is a big drawback, because if you're constantly trying to manifest shit to mask fear, you're just going to keep spinning on this circle, this wheel of reoccurrence until the fear is let go. So it's like if you have scarcity concerns and you keep thinking, oh, if I just had $5,000 more dollars, or $10,000 more dollars, or $100,000 more dollars, or $1 million more dollars, then I can feel a certain way. That becomes the same thing. You're trying to manifest from scarcity. You're trying to manifest from reactivity, instead of thinking from, what is that money going to do for you? Will it give you peace? Will it give you a sensation of feeling like more alive, exciting? Is it fun? Because I find making money to be kind of fun, like a game. After and this has taken years of development to get to this point, because I did have a lot of drama associated, like I said, with they're creating money out of nothing and blah blah blah. But as going through this progression of this development and whatnot, trying to have more fun with it. I get excited at times where it's like, oh, that customer just paid the invoice. It's like, or somebody listening now is like, oh, here's some support, and it's like, oh, fuck yeah, that's awesome, thank you. It's like, it's exciting, it's kind of fun that it's like working, and shit like that, and so, to me, then how do you like hold on to that and like the here and now? Well, it's like, well, how would you feel like if you're on vacation, or if you're in heaven, if you're just, if that was no longer a problem, then you can start thinking from that end, and as you're able to do that, every moment that you're able to like not only embody that state but not have any resistance associated with it, or it's like sometimes you can put on like those states and like it kind of freaks you out, because it makes it feel like your old slave programming will kick in and it'll be like, oh shit, it's almost like a fear of death, this changing of states. And so, a lot of times then the resistance will come back up. A lot of times then the shit that you were like afraid of happening, then it has a tendency to draw that to you on an accident. It's like you don't mean for it to happen, but changing states like that cause some fear, which is why it's important to realize fear is an illusion. But you realize that through experience. And so, yeah, I just wanted to share that concept with you guys. Hopefully it's something you can put on in the here and now. Stop thinking of what it would be like and start thinking from. It's all about the consciousness, so it's like putting on thinking from that consciousness. Maybe your relationship's shitty, and it's like probably a big thing, I've realized through being married is like, when like some conflict happens, a lot of times it's just a miscommunication, but like a lot of it, then you have this mental story like, oh, that you say all this shit, and then it has a tendency to keep perpetuating this drama and bullshit and whatever. But if you start like putting on like thinking from like, oh, we don't have conflicts anymore like that. We've moved to a different thing. You start changing that mental narrative about the other person. A lot of times then, very short, if you're not carrying past baggage to the present moment, or this future progression where you'll eventually be happy together, but it's like actually put it on thinking from like, how would you feel? Would you be even thinking this thought if, things were better? More than likely you wouldn't be thinking that thought. It's like a big thing with like abundance and money scarcity. Like you wouldn't be thinking like that if you were in this new state. So it's like thinking from that premise is how you start to move forward in actually, demonstrating a lot more joy and peace and fruits of the spirit. it's a conscious choice, it's a conscious decision. But it's something you can start to tangibly wear like a set of clothes right now, and that's why I wanted to share that with you guys, so you can start putting that on, start feeling that relief, because you can continuously do this, and you are continuously doing it. But the problem is, in the slave mind, it's continuously telling yourself what you don't what you don't desire, and being reactive to it, in that reactivity, strengthening it, making it worse on accident. And continuously telling yourself this negative spiral when you can be telling yourself something different, which is thinking from, how would you feel if you didn't have this incessant chatter of fear and concerns and what ifs and what if, and but just trust that God's laying out everything perfectly right now, right now, right now. They got the phone rings. Oh, something awesome is unfolding. Something awesome is coming. It's about being more hopeful as things are more and more. Once you realize everything's reflecting a state of consciousness, then it becomes almost stupid to then, well, I don't want to focus on thinking from a state of undesirable slavery. It's like I was. That was how I spent most of my experience of life up until now. But I'm not going to continuously bring that quote unquote past. It is an allusion to the present moment in thought, which is what we're always doing. We're spending most of our time, which is an illusion, in consciousness, in our thought world. It's like you be physically present, but this narrative shit just keeps going and running and stuff. And so it's like, do you want that to be a negative spiral, or do you want to think from that's not a problem I need to concern myself with anymore? I don't need to worry about doing the work, which is another big thing of the old slave minds, constantly thinking that you and your own alone ego in a brain and a body need to force something through efforting and cunning and manipulativeness and just all this shit. Letting go of that, realizing that God does the work. You don't need to worry about the how. You just need to put on the thinking from how would you feel if you were in a state of being in heaven right here and right now. These thoughts and concerns wouldn't be something that you would be thinking. This wouldn't be something to be reacting to. It's about trusting the unfoldment. And when the things do unfold that are undesirable, realize that those are just things in your consciousness that just need to be let go of, revised, dealt with God, by asking God yourself, by going within to help let go of these problems and these problems and these issues and these mindsets and everything else. And look towards Jesus as the example of well, how did he handle this? What was the steps were taken when this happened? It's all laid out, and it's like a lot of times people look at the Bible as some linear chronological history instead of realizing it's about the spiritual right here and right now. It's like all of these are examples of timeless states. And so whatever state that you're experiencing, there's a correlated state in the Bible through a character, through a metaphor, through a what they say Jesus always talked in parables. It's like why is that? Because you have to go within yourself to understand what that even means. If you can talk about, oh, two chickens are doing this and that, on the surface level it could be just two chickens doing this and that. But on a deeper spiritual level, there's metaphors that can be about what's going on when you realize it's all symbolic of consciousness. And so with that being said, I think I'm going to bounce. So, thanks everybody for liking, sharing, subscribing, all the social networking things. I appreciate your spiritual support and your physical support. Thank you for that. And until the next now, God bless.